is, one of the executive directors at the Singularity University. And so when they do programs like summits or like corporate things,
Yeah, I've
right?
got some news for you there, actually.
He's
as well.
on the stage and he's like, you can check out his videos online. He's awesome. I'm like, you can slow down with the talking today. We have plenty of time because you have to shove it all in a
Right.
short amount of time,
we
right?
do. I know. It's going to be fun to be able to just kind of rap for 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, take a deep breath,
Yeah.
although we're having coffee right now, so.
All good. We'll keep it loose and light and just kind of see where it takes us.
I know.
Yeah.
So can you hear me good?
I can hear you great, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And we don't even really know each other well. And this is for me the first challenge because all of my guests so far is like
People you've known for a
yeah.
very, very long time. That's
but
right.
I want to have for this whole podcast, like a big range of people from different walks of life,
Right.
to see how they got there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do know how we met. I was actually, I think it was in 2000. This is the origin of us meeting. 2011, I was planning to do a documentary about the Singularity when my cousin was supposed to do a feature film about Singularity, Roland Emmerich.
Yep.
And so I met this guy, Peter Martin and Jason Silva.
Yep.
And we went to New York. I think it was, 2011. And we were invited to Peter Thiel's house. And so we were at Peter Thiel's house the night before.
I've heard about that space. I've never been up there, but I've heard it's a pretty cool spot.
It's a pretty cool spot,
Is that when the Singularity Summit was taking place?
Yes.
Okay.
It was up on the Upper East Side in this cool old sports athletic club or something.
Right. It's before my time.
And we were walking around Union Square, and then we saw Audrey DeGray, the crazy,
of course,
CC Top
longevity
beard
guy,
and
yep.
And we were like, "Is that him?" And then, of course, she showed up at Peter Thiel's, and we were like, "It is him."
Right.
And then I met Lene, who worked for Ray Kurzweil,
Yeah.
and when I think she went to work for the university, and then she said, "Listen, we have this guy here, the executive director, and his wife. She's an actress, and she's coming to LA, and she doesn't know anybody. Would you meet with her?"
That's right. And she sends her hello and a big hug to you today.
Thank you. And then boom, and then I run into you at the ramen place.
Right. That's right.
And
at
here we
Urban
are.
Ramen.
See, this is how we got here.
That's so interesting. This is how we got here, exactly.
So tell us a little bit, because, even if people tune in who go like, "Oh, this is the guy from Singularity University," maybe some people don't really know what that entails. So what is your job, being an executive director there?
So I actually have some news there, which is I've actually been transitioning out of my day-to-day operating role there into more of kind of a global ambassador role. So for the last 7 years, I've been executive director and been, I joined Singularity in 2013 when it was about a 15-person organization. And I don't know if it's helpful to give a little history of the organization for folks who aren't familiar with it, but it was started by Ray Kurzweil, who is a pretty well-known scientist and futurist and inventor and author, and a guy named Peter Diamandis, who started the X Prize and wrote a book called Bold and Abundance, and started a bunch of different companies. And Ray had written this book called The Singularity is Near.
I have a signed copy.
Do you? Me too. Exactly. Have you read the whole thing?
Of course.
Impressive. Impressive. Not a lot of people can say that. It's a pretty significant undertaking.
Yeah.
That's very dense.
Yeah.
But, as you remember then, in this book, he talked about the accelerating rate of technology, right? And that more and more technologies were growing exponentially. Most people at this time, so this is now 11 years ago, I guess, most people hadn't heard the word exponential growth, right? You hear it everywhere now.
Where it goes from here to here.
Yeah, exactly. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. And it's just this incredibly powerful way of growth. And kind of as things went from or became digital technologies, information technologies, kind of zeros and ones, they started growing exponentially. And there were a bunch of different areas where this was happening. And so Ray wrote about this. Peter read the book and was like, whoa, people have no idea, what's coming, right? There's going to be this period of dramatic change coming down the road. And so they created Singularity as this place where people could come to understand about exponential thinking, They could come to learn about what was happening at the forefront of areas like robotics and artificial intelligence and synthetic biology. And in the early days, it was like the most senior business executives and heads of state and just extraordinary people coming through and trying to understand how these technologies in this period that we were about to enter was going to kind of reshape their businesses and reshape their government. And then I got introduced to it probably in 2012 and did a little dance, getting to know the organization for a little while, and then joined in 2013 as an executive director there to build out these large programs, which hadn't existed yet. And the idea was, how do we, start to scale this organization and touch more and more people? And so that started off initially creating vertically kind of industry-focused programs around exponential medicine and then exponential finance, exponential manufacturing, and then our global summit. And then we started doing these international summits around the world. And now it's become this incredible kind of global organization. And we have, I think, close to 170 chapters in about 159 countries around the world. We'll do close to 20 different summits this year, like big 500 to 2,000 person summits kind of dispersed around the world, and just this incredible kind of ecosystem of amazing people and kind of who are at the forefront of these different areas.
Why do you think it was the knowledge about these technologies were so confined before? Like, because there was no kind of common interest in the greater public, or?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think for a long time, things have been very siloed is part of it. So, people would study their particular area, right? And one of the key kind of tenets of Singularity University is this notion of convergence.
Right.
And so it's all these different technologies coming together.
Like biotech and AI and robotics.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And it's a breakthrough from might be, 2 or 3 different technology areas, or the combination of these different technologies that really leads to these significant breakthroughs. And so I think people started kind of understanding that technologies were growing exponentially. And Peter Diamandis has this amazing 6 Ds where he talks about kind of the stages of technology. And in the earliest days, they're very deceptive. And so I think for a lot of people, they were basically discounting a lot of these things. If you think back to 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, some of these things, artificial intelligence wasn't that talked about, robotics certainly wasn't that talked about, autonomous vehicles. And now we're like at this knee in the curve where these technologies are really becoming super capable. And
mainstream kind of.
And mainstream. Like people are taking these things seriously because they're seeing like, wow, actually, I mean, I drove over here in my Tesla 3 and I had it on autopilot for a bunch of the time. And 2 years ago, that would have been extraordinary to think about, right? That we would actually, that would be happening for most people. And this is not a super fancy vehicle. It's their low-end vehicle, and it drove a good chunk of the way over here, and it was just amazing, and I'm like,
Did you take a nap?
To it. I did not take a nap. I did not take a nap. Not quite that comfortable yet, but it's coming. I'm sure. I've seen photos of people asleep in their Teslas driving down the highway.
So when you do these summits, like you said in the beginning, it was really a very tight group of like world leaders or government officials or big executives. So how has it like broadened, like in terms of the people who want to kind of sign up for the executive program?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, executive program is a week-long program that we do there, and we do, I don't know, kind of between 5 to 10 of those a year, depending on
all over the world.
Most of those happen in the Bay Area where we're headquartered, but they do happen in other with chapter partners now. Globally, we have all these what we call country partners or international summit partners who we have teamed up with who are offering their own programs there. So some of those partners are now starting to do executive programs and kind of offering more and more products there.
But you give them the curriculum?
Yes. Yeah. So we work with them. Here's the curriculum. Here are the topics that are important. We try to find a mix of kind of our core faculty as well as finding local faculty members there. And we have a whole training program for on-ramping folks to become faculty for Singularity University.
So it's basically to kind of just make it more of a global
sorry, I didn't. Yeah, that's right.
Movement.
Didn't address your real question, which is it's very broad. I mean, it's I would say the commonality are these are people who want to be part of moving the world forward in a positive direction. So that's also another key kind of theme around singularity, and something that I'm really passionate about is we have this mission to enable people to leverage technologies to go out and solve the world's biggest problems.
Right.
And you hear a lot of people talking about that as well. And so I think one of the common themes is people who are, they're doers, they're leaders, they're people who are passionate that technology can be at least part of the solution for solving some of the world's problems. I mean, people are still at the core very much in kind of solving these things, but that it's how do we leverage these technologies to move the world forward. And so it's people who really aren't happy necessarily with the status quo, right? And they know that there's so much potential for us to be, doing so much better than we currently are. Peter has this really amazing book called Abundance, which
I read it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just this whole abundance mindset, right? Like you get it. Once you start kind of shifting out of this scarcity mindset into kind of an abundant mindset, you look at the world in a completely different way, and you realize that, we are our only limiting factors, right?
Absolutely.
It's kind of it's politicians. It's lack of will, basically, to move the world forward. It's not a lack of money. It's not a lack of know-how. Like if we wanted to provide free education for the entire world, we could. If we wanted to provide education for the entire world, we could.
Look at what Elon Musk is doing, like with his battery packs and all of that. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, we're going to a world where all these things are going to be highly deflationary period. Things will be essentially free. So it's not about do we have enough. It's a matter of how do we allocate our resources and how do we level everyone up. So really help humanity and mankind kind of realize what it's truly capable of, which is pretty exciting, pretty amazing.
But in a way, what do you think about how does the human kind of being come into play with that too? Because I think like if you limit yourself, what you just said, it's also a conditioning that we have that is ancestral, that we like learn something where you can make money or, you can't change your life, or it's like we have a lot of conditioning for limiting beliefs.
How you look at yourself is how the world reacts to you and how you see the world, right? It's your own lens. And so we're entering into this, I think, totally new paradigm now where people have to really shift their thinking around, what is possible? Like, what does their life look like? And it's a challenging transition, right? We're at this period right now where there's still, very much a scarcity mindset. Capitalism is the driving force. And, we can see that that's not serving humanity well. And there's some major adjustments that need to happen there. And people need to, I think, they're the younger generation now. I don't know, like, I hate to say that because you sound so freaking old when you say that, but like kids, you talk to kids these days. I've got nieces and nephews, and they're just like extraordinarily so much more evolved than I was at that age, and how they look at the world and how they're so much more mature and confident and focused, I think, on the right things and trying to help us, help lift, be accepting of everyone. And how do we all serve, or raise up all of humanity in a much more powerful way. So I think there is a shift that's happening. Can't happen fast enough. Obviously, our leader right now is someone who's who has not shifted and is very much in this scarcity mindset and creating a lot of kind of pain and throughout the world as a result of that. But those ways and that mindset is dying, I think, and we're shifting, I think, into a new era that isn't necessarily going to be a super smooth, easy transition. But I think there's a potential for us to get to a really, really kind of magical place where humans get to realize what they're truly capable of in a really different way.
Absolutely. And I think, if more people had that vision, like you're talking about our leader, for example, but there's, to me, like exactly those two different things. Like you want to develop something or work towards something for the greater good, or you are totally ruled by ego.
Right.
Because
and
that's
fear.
also a pathology,
Right.
that's going on there. It's based on greed and fear.
Yeah, I think fear has been such a primary driver for people for so long. And that's part of the scarcity mindset, right? There isn't enough, right? Am I going to have enough for my family, for myself to survive? Like those worries should there's plenty of people who still have those worries, but that it's not a necessary worry anymore. It doesn't need to be. There's no reason we
But
can't
it's
feed
also a
everyone.
victim kind of mindset, Yeah, of course you can do it, but me, I'm like, but it's all comes from the mind.
It does.
But I have to say, for example, I did one of the first executive programs that they did at 20th Century Fox.
Oh yeah, yep.
I think
I
was
was
the
at the
first
second
one.
Yeah, that Elon was at, right?
No.
No.
Ray was there, but I think they did the whole holograph,
Okay.
to beam him in. But Cayman was there. There were a bunch of interesting people. And it was funny because we did this icebreaker exercise, the spaghetti challenge.
Yeah, right.
And here I am sitting next to a Harvard professor and Ashton Kutcher and the guy who invented the cloud, this French guy. And it was very intimidating, But at the end of the day, we're playing this game, And then we had all the lectures about all the branches of singularity.
What was so interesting, though, about that game specifically,
Right.
I don't know if you remember the little video that they show at the end or if they did in that instance. I wasn't there for that.
No,
but
I don't remember.
There's this amazing kind of short, I think it's like a 5-minute TED Talk that someone gave that basically kind of talks about this exercise. And then they talk about the people who do the best at it and the people who do the worst at it. And the worst at it are MBA students who recently graduated MBA students who think they know everything. Everyone wants to take charge. And they kind of just pick a path and start driving down that path really aggressively. And the ones who did the best of it actually were I think it was either kindergartners or middle school students. I think it was kindergartners.
People who are more free, who don't have that drive that I must solve it.
And they test a lot of things. So what happens is they fail really quickly. So they'll try all these different ways of doing it, see what's working. If it fails, no harm, no foul, and they'll move on to the next thing. And they did extraordinarily well. Engineers did the best because they understood, structurally exactly how this all worked. But I think the next group was kindergartners, and it was by far and so interesting to see that having that kind of plasticity mentally and that willingness to take chances and to fail and to not take it personally. I mean, let go of the ego and let's try a lot of different things and see what's working and then move forward. I love that exercise.
Yeah. I did too. It was intimidating for me because they're like, what do you do? I'm like, oh, nothing important. But anyway, so then we learned about all these different branches, and then we were put together in groups, and we were given one of the big issues in the world to solve, hunger, disease.
Yeah, no big deal, right?
Yeah, no big deal.
You got 30 minutes. Figure it all out.
Figure it out. So we're sitting there, and then I was mostly drawn towards the neuroscientists. I'm fascinated by neuroscience because it's also one of the things that, we still don't know a lot about the brain and how it functions. So I think it was Christian Klug or something who was talking there. He was German. He had an accent. Anyhow, so there I'm sitting in my little group trying to figure out the big problems in life, And at some point I say to them all, guys, we have enough food in the world. We have, we have the technology to make clean water in certain areas of the world. It's really just, do we really need all of these technologies? How much of humanity and the willingness, distribution, socialism and stuff can come in to help before we even need to use these technologies? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting kind of, mental exercise, right?
Yeah.
To think about there's just kind of a broader question about technology and at what point is enough. Hardcore technologists just believe any technology, new technology is a good technology and we should keep pushing and advancing. And, at some point it's maybe not a human maximizing addition to the world, right? Some of these technologies...
Because we have to catch up as human beings to that because we're not exponential.
Right. And we really can't catch up. There's just no way it's possible for us to catch up at this point with the growth that's taking place. We're going to need computers and AI to be able to handle this new world that we're moving into.
Right.
And I think part of the question, though, is, it doesn't feel like it's stoppable, but you could imagine where or I guess, who really knows what is the right answer for maximizing humanity's happiness?
Yeah.
What do you want to solve for? Is it maximum per capita income? Is it happiness? Is it longevity? And all those things kind of require different technologies in different societies, and an algorithm that you're designing towards, right? They're each very, very different algorithms. And so we're moving so quickly with so many different types of technologies that are just pushing us forward really, really rapidly. And some of those things may add a lot to humanity, and some of those things, like, Facebook and social media, have clearly harmed humans, right? And causing people, decreasing happiness among people, causing us to make bad decisions that don't serve us well. Vote.
Did you read the McNamee's book, I Got Zucked?
I haven't read that yet.
Yeah,
Have you
but
read it?
you've heard about it.
Yeah, I have
right?
heard about it. Yeah.
No, I just heard I just watched a YouTube video where he's talking about he turned towards the whole tech community that he was one of the founders of.
Turned against it.
Yeah. Because
Roger McNamee's, right?
Yeah.
Book. Yeah. We had him I think the last 2 years at the Global Summit, Singularity's Global Summit, and actually before we really broke the whole his turn against Facebook, actually at our Global Summit a couple of years ago, which was really exciting to be able to do, and fascinating to see that, as you said, someone who was on the board and very early investor and an advocate has realized that it's actually gone in a pretty negative direction and needs to do some pretty significant course correction for it to.
But that's what I like about him, because he's kind of an old hippie.
Yeah, very much. Right?
And here comes the other mindset, because he grew up in the summer of love and the 60s and stuff. And, also, if you think about it, Steve Jobs went to India and, searched out gurus and things like that. So there's all of this aspect to free and open your mind, where maybe all those insights and those ideas came from. So there's a really deep human factor in it, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I think a lot of those folks, right, were exposed to that period during some of the early real kind of advocates and fathers of, or the people who helped create a lot of these major technology movements back, started in the 70s and 80s and 90s, right, were exposed to some very different ways of thinking. And now you have, this is all, super broad generalization, but you maybe have some technology leaders who are disconnected from that, right? Or maybe, more engineering focus and less about community and society sometimes, and more just about technology. And it's really the combination of the incredible things that technology is capable of, with really understanding and thinking about society as a whole, and how you help create a beautiful, healthy society that does lift everyone up. This whole, we're entering this fascinating period, right, where the nation state is becoming less important. Yeah. And at some point, it's almost like if humans can't get out of our own way, humans are the ones that are creating, it's a few people in the world who make these decisions that ultimately cause such hardship and take, cause so much suffering for so many people. At some point, you could imagine that a powerful AI that's really designed to optimize existence for all of humanity might be making very, very different decisions on what the world looks like, and the importance of nation states and currency and civil rights and privacy and things like that.
But what you're talking about, the suffering, is mainly you're talking about the governments and the officials. But it's interesting how the technology comes always from the private sector. So
sometimes though it's as a result of significant government spending, right, to do research. We've in the U.S. have moved away from a lot of that. And we look at China. China as a government is putting such enormous resources into robotics and AI and all these different quantum computing, because they know it's so important, and there'll be so many things that will trickle down that will help the entire country and allow them to really lead. The U.S. has moved away. They used to be, huge resources would go into the public the creation in these labs of technology that could then be used also in the private sector, and would trickle down and help, spur so much innovation. And then we've moved away from that for a long time. And I think the U.S. government is just starting to talk again about making major investments in artificial intelligence and quantum. And there's some people say if you lose the quantum computing race, if you lose the AI race, it's over. Whoever gets to those two places first really is going to
Yeah,
be
you're
able
not going to
to.
be compatible.
Well, they're going to be able to control everything.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you have a bad actor who's controlling that, that's scary. And hopefully, if there's a good actor that gets it, they remain good actors. And there's this notion of AI, artificial general intelligence, kind of reaching a certain point, and kind of breaking away. And once you hit that certain tipping point, no one will ever be able to catch up with you. And same thing with quantum computing. And so we're entering these really interesting new paradigms that are going to create some really interesting and risks to humanity, and as well as incredible opportunities for humanity.
Yeah, and you just said controlling, so I don't even like that word. Why would one nation or so want to control something if in their mind they really want to help the entire world, or they have that social aspect in it, to better everything for humanity?
I don't think that's the mindset of most countries and most
No.
leaders, right? I mean, it's about their people, and it's really about
Yeah.
themselves and power of the
And we
of the
have to think
elites.
beyond that.
We have to.
We
Exactly.
absolutely.
But what does that world look like, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, how is it a strong United Nations that's driven by, AI decision-making based algorithms? Is it, does one country that's hopefully a benevolent country win this race, and they're driving what's happening around the world?
Well, I think it's just like mainly we have to meet the basic human needs for everybody, every human being on the planet. That should be the goal. There's, like I said earlier, there's enough for everybody.
Yep.
It's just the point of distributing in the right way.
And we're going in the right direction. I mean, I think we should also make sure it's clear in this conversation. Like, I'm very optimistic. I think there's things to be worried about for sure. But I also, if you look at the data, this is the best time in the history of the world for humans to be alive.
But see, you're optimistic because you don't have the scarcity mind, because you have the abundant mind already. And that's the thing also. I think we also have to work on that human aspect of giving people or making people give themselves permission,
right,
to think bigger.
Yep.
Because these limiting beliefs are really like a big problem.
Yeah, it's what's. I haven't spent a lot of time in this area, but there's a whole theory of beliefs that basically, and some data with rats, and that the historical learnings of your ancestors basically gets passed down in your DNA, right?
Absolutely.
Your genetic code.
So interesting.
The thing that they were frightened of, or the hard lessons that they learned, or the trauma that they experience, gets passed down.
Yeah.
And it takes multiple generations to kind of work through that. And there's some medicines that people, or some of the plant-based stuff that's going on now with psychedelics to help
So
evolve.
interesting,
It's
huh?
so fascinating, right? To help people let go of that and move beyond that, and showing incredible efficacy. So it's like we've got this DNA that was designed for a very different era. And all of a sudden, like, we're in a place where we have to reimagine this world, and people need to be able to, as you said, give themselves permission to kind of reimagine what life can look like when you have more than enough.
But that's also what I said earlier, that our biological, being hasn't caught up with that yet. And apparently, I'm reading Michael Pollan's book right now, How to Change Your Mind.
Yeah, it's an amazing book.
It's amazing, yeah. And I love that the whole psilocybins have a resurgence right now, because that was what it was originally planned for, to treat people with post-traumatic stress disorder, addiction, trauma, and so forth. Things that were just like kind of swept underneath the rug for a long time. Oh yeah, carry on, and they're profound.
Be fine, tough it out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've gotten to know Paul Stamets, who's a famed mycologist, and Rick Doblin, who's heading up the effort with MAPS, the legalization of MDMA, through some of the singularity work. And, it's just extraordinary what they're doing, and the efficacy that these medicines are showing. I mean, MDMA is being used to treat vets now who have, terrible, terrible PTSD. Nothing has been able to help them. And with a single dose, sometimes they can completely let that trauma go and become functional, living, happy
amazing.
members of society. And there's also this incredible movie out called Trips of Compassion.
Okay.
And it's filmed in Israel. It follows, I think it's 3 or 4 different trauma victims and different types of traumas, everything from, you know, sexual related traumas to an ambulance driver who comes upon an exploded bus, and people who have really, you know, are in terrible places in life and suicidal and shells of them of their former selves. And they're through these 3 treatments and with guides, and they film the sessions as well, so you can actually see what's happening when they're on there, which is really, I think, nice for people who are interested in this to be able to see actually what is happening when you're on this. And Michael Pollan does a good job of kind of describing it, but you see how it takes them and essentially, you know, rebuilds them, allows them to let go of these terrible things that they have experienced and to reemerge. And to think that you could do, you know, 3 sessions of a medicine, of a totally non-addictive medicine, and be back out contributing to society is just extraordinary.
Extraordinary. And why would you not legalize anything like that?
It's coming.
You know?
I mean, there's stage 3 trials for MDMA that will be able to be used for therapy probably in the next year or 2, which is exciting. And same thing happening with psilocybin. And, you know, it's 30 plus years, 40 years, I guess, since a lot, or actually even longer than that, right? That it was the summer of love when these things started to become very
even before,
recreational.
if you think when Hoffman discovered it by accident, you know, in Switzerland. But then also Tim Leary and Richard Alpert, known as Ram Dass later. You know.
Who just passed, sadly, right?
Just passed, yeah. I used to go to his retreats.
Oh, no way. Lucky you. Wow.
With Jack Kornfield and all these people around,
Oh, my God. Lucky you.
They have
I'd
great
love to hear about that at some
speakers
point.
there. So I didn't go this year, but in 2019. The last time I went was 2018. But
to Hawaii? Is that where you do them?
In Hawaii, because we couldn't travel anymore.
Right.
But they were the trailblazers of all of that, you know. So you're in this great job, you have this positive mindset, and you want to change the world to be a better place. And how did you get to the Singularity University? Like, I mean, you didn't grow up as a 6-year-old saying, I want to become a tech guy. Like fireman, maybe, a veterinarian, right? What was your first... Well, do you remember when you were a kid what your first kind of aspiration was, what you wanted to do in life?
So I was always super entrepreneurial. So I was always starting businesses and building things, and just my dad was an entrepreneur, and so I think I inherited some of that DNA. And
good DNA.
Yeah. And I though pretty early on though was attracted to computers. I was really lucky. We had an Apple II Plus, I think. So one of the very early Apple computers. So I got a little bit of experience on programming and playing with some of the early software. And then I ran an early computer bulletin board service back in the 80s. You know, it was very early. A lot of times I'm like, okay, how could I not have seen some of the internet opportunities that were coming? You know, just having that early insight. I missed some of those opportunities to get involved with some of those companies in the early days, which I think would have just been so fascinating to help build out some of the early internet tech. But I was always just really passionate about starting and creating companies. And
where did you grow up? Where was that?
So I grew up outside of Boston. I was born in New York and lived on Long Island for a little while, and then about 4th grade moved up to Cambridge, Mass, and lived in Cambridge for a couple of years. Then we moved out to the suburbs and kind of 6th grade on out there. And then came out to California for college and grad school.
Where'd you go to college?
UC Santa Barbara.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Did you surf and stuff? And
I learned
the
how
party
to surf
college,
a little
right?
bit. That's what they say. It's amazing. You need over 4.0 to get into these places.
Yeah.
Now it's crazy. So I'm lucky I did not quite have a 4.0 back then. But
so what did you study there?
So I studied something called Law and Society. So it was poli-sci with a emphasis on constitutional law. And I had an amazing professor, this guy named Charles Reich, who wrote The Greening of America, that got me excited about it. And we had a visiting political pollster, I guess, named Pat Cadell, who was there. And so with all these things, it's all about people. And so I had a couple really interesting professors that got me excited about thinking about these areas and learning about it. And so that's what I ended up studying. But it was ultimately more about, I would say what I learned there has had probably very little to do on my life path. The people that I met there have had way more to do about my life path, and just made extraordinary friends there who continue to be my friends, an important part of my life now.
But do you think like the way how, you graduate from high school, then you go to college, is
Yeah.
it something also that was kind of inflicted to you by your parents, where they say like you must learn something, right, and to make a living, and
Yeah.
like
Oh, yeah,
where
for
we
sure.
sometimes don't have the room to think like, what do we really want to do?
Right. And be really think outside. But definitely there was a path. And parents were super supportive.
Okay.
But, my dad had his JD MBA, pretty well-educated guy. My mom gone to college, was the homemaker. But as part of our family, education was always a very important piece of it.
Very like
Yeah.
academic background.
Yeah, it wasn't, I didn't feel incredible pressure to get A's. I wasn't an A student when I was younger at all. And but it was really clear to me that I was expected to go off to college. And I don't think there was ever anything said about having to go to graduate school, but was kind of self-motivated to do that, and had seen from example friends and my dad, going off and doing that type of stuff. But there never was like the opportunity to really step back and to say, why don't you try? There's some really different paths out there, and to go and explore. And it was very much get out of college and go get a job, and got to make some money, and you got to support yourself and all that. But there's a lot of ways, like especially today, right? People find these really amazingly alternative paths.
Yeah.
They go out, they're nomads. They don't have a home. They're able to work remotely, especially if you know how to code and are in the tech world. I mean, I know these people who just float around the world having these incredible experiences and are still making a great living and contributing and having a very different path through this life, which is really interesting. And I don't think as much of that existed when I was growing up, or at least I was not exposed to it. So it was like, okay, you're going to go and do this. And business was always, making money was always kind of held up as something important, and something that, I've kind of struggled with, I think, as I've gone through life, trying to figure out how important it is to me, whether it should be important to me, what I want to focus on, how do I find more kind of purpose and meaning than just trying to go out and make money.
So did you find that purpose in your studies in college, or
No.
not so much?
Nope, not.
So what did you do after?
So when I came out of college, I spent a couple years trying to break into the venture capital business.
Right.
So which, there's just no one's hiring people out of college to be venture capitalists. But I was just, for whatever reason, like really interested in that space, and this idea of being able to work with entrepreneurs and help start, maybe not be the one starting a business, but I could
finding
help,
them.
Yeah, finding them. And it's been kind of an interesting, like I would say, if I look at my life, I've got this mix of either being an entrepreneur or intrapreneur sometimes, like with Singularity, or being an investor and trying to find companies. And I didn't get to finish the arc at the beginning, but I'm transitioning out of my executive director role at Singularity University and going to become more of just a global ambassador, speaking and emceeing at events. And I've been investing for the last 5 years around the Singularity ecosystem and some of these incredible technologies and companies that I've been finding. And so I'm shifting some of my efforts into that, and then, also working on dreaming up some new things as well. Coming out of school, I was drawn to VC and spent a couple of years trying to get a job there. Couldn't find my way into that world. And finally my dad gave me some advice, which was like, find a great company that's growing really quickly and take any job you can and work hard, and think opportunities will open up. And so I ended up joining this company called Intuit, which makes, at the time anyway, basically had a single product, Quicken, now makes QuickBooks, and is a huge company. But it was a small company at that point, and I joined initially doing tech support. That was the job I could get. So I got in there, and I was answering the calls and helping people with their problems with Quicken, and then pretty quickly realized that marketing was what drove that company. And Intuit was one of the first companies that really took a traditional consumer marketing approach and applied it to software. And so really trying to understand understand the consumer and what the problem was and how to connect with them and solve that problem and market to them. And so started just volunteering, on my weekends doing the crappy work that no one in the marketing department really wanted to do, and then ultimately got myself a job in there and worked there for I guess about 3.5 years at Intuit, and most of it in this product management role in the marketing group.
But then you felt like you had to move on. You needed to graduate from that.
I did. So I felt the pull of entrepreneurship at that point, and
but it was your apprenticeship, so to speak. It was your stepping stone.
Yeah,
to get in.
Yeah,
somehow.
exactly. Like starting
Put your hours in and work hard
and learn, right,
yeah,
and figure out. Like, I mean, there's something to be said about. I think it was really great advice to join a great company and just learn from great people. And in some ways, I mean, I've had a really interesting, roller coaster career in many ways, some incredible highs, some really serious challenges with my entrepreneurial hat on. In some ways, I wish I had just stuck it out a little longer at Intuit to watch and learn and grow, just to be around people who are so experienced. Scott Cook, who founded the company, is just this remarkable entrepreneur and built I don't know the market cap of the company, and not that that's the what success looks like, but he's built a huge, very, very successful company. So many incredible people have come out of that business. And it's something where I think if I had stayed, 5 or 10 years, I would have just gotten this unbelievable education in what it looks like to build a great company. So, but that didn't happen.
But maybe you needed to make the other experience, for some other reasons,
For sure.
because these setbacks sometimes, teach you a lot more. Too.
I think that's absolutely
more
right.
than successes.
Yeah, I think, and I wouldn't, like most people say, I would not trade anything and make any different decisions. I mean, I feel so grateful for where I am now and this journey that I've had and the things that I've learned, and it's allowed me to empathize with, entrepreneurs. And I think as I spend more time investing now, it's like getting to really understand and be able to connect with them around the struggle of creating businesses is,
So what was one of your biggest struggles after that you were just mentioning?
Yeah, so I left. I mean, I'll take you through the journey. I don't know. This was actually one of my highlights, entrepreneurship wise, and maybe we'll hit it in chronological order. But this was I ended up starting a restaurant chain with some friends of mine. We did some research as to what was happening, and
what was it called?
It was called World Wraps. So if you know what a wrap is,
yes.
So we actually created and popularized the wrap, and so we did this research where we were basically looking to see. So at the time, you had either sit down, fine dining, or you had fast food, and there really wasn't what's become known as this whole quick service category. Where you
and a
get
little healthy.
Healthy, multicultural. I mean, so we noticed that people were becoming more adventurous and wanted to try different cuisines, and we saw that people were, there was this big hole basically where if you wanted a higher quality product but you didn't want to sit down and have a 1-hour meal, there really wasn't anything to kind of fill that gap. So we spent about a year designing this company and the products. We teamed up with this amazing guy named Aaron Novoshen, who is an executive chef at one of the 4-star restaurants in San Francisco. Wow. And how do you take his kind of fine dining background and how can we use the tortilla as the delivery mechanism but wrap up all these incredible meals? And so it was everything from salmon and mashed potatoes with peas to Peking duck to paella to teriyaki chicken.
So it was the high-end wrap.
Yeah. I mean, so it was very high-end. Wraps didn't exist, and so it was this whole notion. And actually, we weren't calling them wraps until about 3 or 4 months before we opened the store and the restaurant, and we do these tastings. People would freak out about the food because it was.
What was the price point? Was it affordable?
Yeah, the whole idea was it was probably anywhere from. This is 95. We opened this first one. So it was anywhere from probably like $4 up to $8 for a wrap. And everything was being made, sauteed up to order. And so people would come to these tastings that we were having before we opened, love the food. And then we'd go and describe it to people who weren't there. And they would anchor, we were calling it a burrito at the time. And they would anchor on burrito and think of I love burritos, but it has a certain connotation, right? And so we realized at some point that we needed to create this new way of thinking about or a new vessel, a new name for what we were creating. And so people have been wrapping foods forever, but called it a wrap, and also created flavored tortillas, tomato flavored and spinach flavored tortillas, which people hadn't done before, and opened up in the Marina District of San Francisco on Chestnut Street, and it was just crazy from the get-go, like lines out the door, running out of it. I mean, it was like your dream as an entrepreneur, what you hope will happen. We raised $211,000 to open it. We had
one location, the
one
mothership.
Location, the mothership.
But the idea was to franchise?
Yeah, the idea was always to build a bigger company. Actually, not to franchise, but just to do company-owned stores. And, we were young kids. We didn't have any idea what we were doing. We had $11,000 in the bank account when we opened, which is not a lot when you need to have some working capital. And we were running out of food and having all sorts of crazy things happening. But it was just an amazing time. And I did it with 3 of my best friends who are still my best friends, and it was just this incredible journey. And we got to a point where we were opening up a unit a month and got to 30 stores on the West Coast. And
all over the States?
Everything from kind of the Seattle area all the way down to San Diego. And ultimately ended up selling it. And it was, I went off to business school. I brought in someone to be the CEO and kind of was on to the next chapter. But it was just this amazing journey of being a young entrepreneur and creating something new and delivering, a really high quality product that hadn't existed. And it was,
and make it a success.
And make it a success. Yeah, it was like.
So it was like mission accomplished. Hand it over, and you were on to the next chapter?
I was on. I mean, it wasn't. It's a.
You didn't want to be in the restaurant business, clearly.
That wasn't. Yeah. So it's what's funny actually. It's come full circle, and 2 of my old partners have bought World Wraps back, and hadn't gotten any love for a very, very long time. It was down to I think 3 units. They just bought. There were a couple in the Bay Area and one up in Seattle. Bought it back, have completely revamped it and relaunched it, and are opening up another unit I think this week on Chestnut Street in the Marina. So it's like all the way back, and they've just been cranking. But they asked me if I wanted to be part of it, and I didn't want to be part of it. I'm happy for them to do it, but it's not something that I'm passionate about as an industry. But it was just like one of the greatest joys of my life, getting to do this with such close friends and learn and grow and build something. Yeah, it was really amazing.
Wow. And then you went to business school?
Then I went off to business school, wasn't sure, kind of what I wanted to do next. And 2 of my partners had gone to business school. And I was just figured give me a time to learn, to meet some amazing people, and then kind of think about, hopefully come out of there with some clarity around what I wanted to do next.
Right. A lot of people that, for example, filmmakers or something, they'd say, oh, I just went to film school because I wanted to be around my peers. There's so much more opportunity to learn by doing, to be an apprentice or, to just meet somebody and work your way up from the mailroom, so to speak.
Right.
You did at that company. Yeah. So was that one of the motivations too, kind of?
I think, I think, I mean, I knew it wouldn't hurt, right? And in some ways,
besides the knowledge that they convey,
it's really about the people. I think everything in life is about is about people.
Absolutely,
right? And it's that's what makes life amazing. If you're lucky, if you're around extraordinary people, and that's I don't want to say everyone's extraordinary, right? So just finding great people who you connect with that resonate
with you, that you're vibing with, and then the results
magic happens.
Magic
happens. That's as I get older, it's it's all about the people. I will not spend any energy with people that I don't think are good human beings or who aren't trying to help the world and trying to do good stuff. So there's it is a waste of time, right? You got to be positive. And I've got a good friend who. This guy named Paul Pagnato who just wrote a book called The Transparency Wave, and it's all about how important it is to be transparent. But this guy has
and authentic,
right? If you are being transparent, right, you are being authentic, and people can really connect with you. And this whole notion, he has such he calls it PMA, positive mental attitude, and when you have that mindset, it changes everything, right? You're just so much more open, and it just brings good stuff to
It
you.
brings out the best in everybody
Yeah.
because, for the longest time, people are just presenting this best brochure of themselves. Or look at now at social media and all of
Yeah.
that, And
I
then
feel
you
so
see,
conflicted about that.
I
Like the
know, and the
Instagram stuff.
suicide rate has risen
Right.
into, 30%, I heard, in the last decade.
Yeah, it's grown, I think,
crazy.
25% in the last,
Crazy.
10 or 20
And I
years.
think a lot of that has to do with this as well, because there's no real human connection,
Right.
or
People feel so isolated.
Yeah.
Right? Like we as beings need to be around other people and connect with other people. I know I'm happiest when I'm with, a small group of my closest friends and family.
Yeah,
right?
but we are hardwired for community. I
Yeah.
mean, that's where we come from tribe, and like everybody has a role in the
Right.
community and helping each other. And
It's so easy to become just anonymous here, and especially in LA. I mean,
LA
LA
is
is
very
such-
isolating.
Very isolating.
Yeah,
It's so
everything is
interesting.
behind closed doors. You don't
Yeah.
even know. Sometimes you drive down the street and you see a gate, and then you don't know what's behind it.
Right,
It could
right. And
be-
just how
yeah.
people interact. I mean, how people drive in this city, right? It's as
Yeah.
if they're the only ones who exist sometimes, and
Yeah,
they
it's
don't
a
realize
bubble.
it's another human being in that car who's having their own life journey. And I think I'm hoping that because I think more and more people are articulating that this is a problem and that folks are so disconnected and that social media is having these negative consequences on kids and on everyone really, on our mental health. And so how do you actually design a physical world and a technology world that helps understand
complements each.
complements us and helps us realize our best and our happiest state.
Yeah.
And it definitely is around community and feeling connected and experiences, right? More and more focus around entertainment, or there seems to be a lot of energy now going into experiential entertainment, kind of bringing people together to have these opportunities to connect and be in smaller groups and
Especially kids and, young adults, because what you said earlier, they are so much more advanced than we were when we grew up. But there's a lack of that community, so it happens virtually more.
Yeah.
So,
There's
but
also a meanness right now, like this, something that really, I mean, I don't know, I'm a big believer in fairness and kindness, and I'm sure I don't live it all the time, but I feel like kindness is just one of the most
a core value,
underappreciated virtues. And I think our world is becoming less and less kind. And certainly we've got a president right now who is, the opposite of kind in so many ways. And that it's just such a sad way to go through life. And so my hope is that we're moving back towards a world that is going to be filled with more kindness, where people have more empathy for each other and realize that, you never have any idea what's going on with someone else, and everyone's having their own challenging journey, right? We all have our own problems that we're dealing with and our own path that we have to go. And sometimes it's a great day and sometimes it's a really tough day. And someone, needs to get in front of you, like give them a little space and let them merge into your road.
But I think when people are isolated, they become more self-absorbed, and then they lose that empathy. It's all about them, and
agree.
that's so important also to kind of open up, because then we all have the same fears, the same feelings. We're all human,
Right. Right.
And regarding our leader, I think sometimes really bad things, when they happen, they kind of wake up like something, like you just said, we need more kindness, but we have this mean leader. But before that, it was maybe dormant, that people are not aware of, that we're not being kind or
Right.
not being compassionate.
Because certainly there's been, this
I mean,
country and the
9/11
world.
happened, and New Yorkers were really like, what you doing and stuff. And then all of a sudden, the whole city came together and
Right.
people helped each other.
Right.
Because they were all in the same boat,
Yep.
So sometimes these...
It takes those shocks, right, to bring humanity back together. And
unfortunately. But
So I hope you're right. I hope this is one of those times, and that this will move to bring us together and get us on a better path.
yeah, it's definitely some challenging but interesting times to be alive nowadays.
It is I think it's an incredible time to be alive.
I think so too.
Yeah, I think we're so
so
lucky
too.
to be alive in this era, and the things that, because this abundance that is happening, and it's coming, right? We're going to get there no matter what.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of how smooth this journey is. Like, when do you start to shift that mindset? Like, it just opens up the whole world to you. What do you want? How do you want to spend your time? Like, what
Exactly.
is going to allow you to
Talking to you.
contribute as much? Right. Likewise. You know, it's really very, very exciting. And it's not to say, again, that it's all easy and there's plenty of, you know, I have tough days. It's hard. Life is, you know, always a challenge. But
Yeah.
that there's things you don't need to be as like, you got this. We have more than enough, and it's gonna be great.
Yeah, and for me that was kind of my inspiration for 2020. It was like, get out of your comfort zone, do the things you always like put on the back burner. You know, I love talking to people. I love reading memoirs, biographies. I'm like, why don't I do a podcast? You know,
Right.
I was like, the day before yesterday was my first taping. I was really nervous, and I was, it would be terrible if I wouldn't, because then it wouldn't be important.
Right.
You know,
That's
like
right. Anytime you're doing something new, right? It's always there's
yeah, or if
learning,
you're
it's-
indifferent about something, you can care less.
Right.
So
Right. You
it's
wanna do a
nice to
good job.
feel alive. And also, my intention was for this year, you know, to be more present. Yeah, it's like more present and productive.
Right.
Because when you are present, you know, you lose all. You're more in the flow. You know, the whole Flow Geno project.
Yep.
You know about that.
Yep, I do.
And I find, you know, you need to practice it. You just need to practice. And because we all know, we read about it, we intellectualize it, but we need to embody it, and we need to live it.
Yep, totally agree.
And also be comfortable with the uncomfortable situations, and not like push them away and go like, I want to go in the comfort zone again. Like, no, like feel what you feel, you know?
Yeah, I've gotten into ocean swimming. So I moved to Santa Monica about 7 months ago, and with a good friend of mine, we've been going out and swimming 2 or 3 days a week in the ocean.
In a wetsuit?
No wetsuit.
No.
So, yeah, no wetsuit.
my
So it's like, talk about getting out of your comfort zone. And I wasn't really a super strong swimmer. I knew how to swim. We started off initially just going to the Santa Monica Community College pool, and then he convinced me that we should go try the swimming with the ocean in the ocean. And talk about something that, like, the first time I went out, I almost had a panic attack. I mean, we swim out about 1/8 of a mile, and then you swim down a mile and swim back in, and then run down the beach. It's this incredible workout, and it's right as the sun is rising.
And you're in nature.
It's so beautiful,
Yeah.
but it's like your brain. Like, I have some days where it's torture. I mean, I'm scared. I'm can't get enough oxygen. I'm drowning, you know, sharks,
Yeah.
cold, all these things. And then I have other times when my brain just gets quiet, and I'm strong and focused, and, you know, and they might be back-to-back days, and it's just like, you never know what you're going to get, but persevering through those tough days to get through it and get it done. And it's just been such an interesting kind of life learning experience for me. And I've learned that part of like the craziness in my brain is takes my body a while to warm up when I'm swimming. So the first half of it, my body is not really warmed up yet. I'm not getting enough oxygen, and my brain is screaming and like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. And then my body starts to warm up, and I get into my, you know, flow, and then it's quiet, and it's great. And so just understanding that, and then also just pushing yourself to do something that, like, I never ever thought of myself as a ocean water swimmer, never thought of myself as someone who could make it, you know, all year round without a wetsuit. I mean, those were the crazy, crazy folks. We started off actually doing these group swims, and there was a Navy SEAL, big group of folks, and NFL players, and those guys, you know, whether for whatever reason have not been able to meet us and go swimming these other times. So it's just my friend and I, and neither of us are like big ocean swimmers, and we're getting this done. And it's just like, I don't know, it's such a life lesson. So many times I think we put these limiting beliefs on ourselves. And I've just felt over and over again that I'm creating that limiting belief, and I'm actually capable of so much more. And we're all capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit for. So like, that's one of the messages for me that I'm so passionate about sharing with people, and hoping that people can kind of recalibrate their thinking and have this growth mindset and this ability to realize that, you know, the brain is incredibly plastic. We can continue to learn new things, you know, until the day we die. And you got to keep growing. If you're not growing, you're, you know, contracting.
But that's the thing. You have to educate yourself about it, like, you know, the brain that changes itself and all of these things. Because some people, you are very self-motivated. So am I. Like, we'll go like, okay, what can I do, you know, to kind of challenge myself?
Yeah.
Some people don't have the tools, you know, so it's also important kind of.
I wonder, why do you think that is? Like,
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think it might be conditioning. It might be. I always ask myself that. I don't have the answer, but why, even in one family, why can like two kids from one family, one can be like super, is it brain chemistry, depressed, or
Right.
take a path of like the least resistance, and another
Yeah.
person kind of, pushes through
Yeah.
and just makes it. And
Yeah, and I
it's
guess,
so
it is
interesting.
super interesting. And
Yeah.
it's not, there's no one right path, right?
No.
It's not like if you're a super achiever, that's the right answer. I mean, it could
Exactly.
be, it's just happiness, right? So if you're a path of least resistance, but you have an amazing friendships, and you found amazing love and relationship,
Yeah.
and you're enjoying your journey, but you don't feel the need to go out and invent the next,
I
supercomputer,
agree.
that doesn't matter.
Funny enough, I travel to Asia a lot, and especially India, and it's so cliche, but the
I've
less
never been.
people have, the happier
Happier
they
they are.
were. I mean, I have had experiences there where you just see the faces, and yes, they maybe, have just their basic human needs met with shelter and food, and maybe not so much with like medical supplies and so forth. And but it's a cliche, but it's true. I really felt that. The more we have, the more problem. Then the other person has more, Then you
Right.
have the car
Right.
and the house, and then you want the island and the plane and
It's never enough, right?
It's never enough. The wanting
Consumerism.
doesn't
Ugh.
stop,
Yeah.
The wanting doesn't stop, which is a good thing in a way to have desires, because otherwise we don't move forward, I think, If you stay complacent and
Right. You're seeing what you're capable of, I guess, and pushing yourself to grow. But, if you look at someone in a small village and they're happy and have a great family,
great,
then,
right?
but then also if that person had access to the world's best education, which they're going to be able to do pretty soon, right? With getting
Yeah.
access to online education, like what could they do, or what else how the world might have advanced in a different way, or
Yeah.
a better way as a result of that. But would that make them less happy? It goes back to, what are you optimizing for,
Yeah.
right? So is it like, I believe in, it should be like, the U.S. is too U.S. or individual focused, I think, and it really, there's some balance between the right of individuals and the right of society as a whole, and trying to maximize society as a whole should be, I think, of more importance than just making sure
Agreed.
that one individual has the right to carry a AK whatever down the road.
I mean, look at just that education. I grew up in Germany, and your education, the path you take, is just determined by your performance. So if you study hard, you go to, after first basic school, it's a different system. You go to a, higher education, and it's not about your wallet. And
Right.
here, it's really a privileged thing to get good education.
How crazy is that, right?
It's
And good health care and these things that are
Healthcare.
basic
Don't even
tenets
get me
of,
started about healthcare. I was coming here this morning. I heard about this guy who's a surgeon himself, and he adopted a child from India who had this rare disease of, growing.
I heard the same thing when I
Did
was
you?
driving over. Yeah.
And then
yeah.
the thing about they
Early
have the
puberty and the two
and
medications.
the two medications.
Yeah.
One is like 48,000, and the
Right.
other one. It's clear that health insurance are a for-profit business, and they don't
Right.
give a fuck
Right.
about if you get better.
Right.
And it makes me, I cannot even fathom that that we're all just living in this and
Right.
accept it.
Right.
This needs to be disrupted.
I agree. I think there's
Big
some
time.
areas in commerce that should not. You worry about, can the government do a great job of it at running some of these things? But
Like Medicare for all, is that going to be a reality? Like,
yeah, I
do
don't.
we have other countries?
Other
who've
countries
proven?
that do it, and there's extraordinary public servants in these fields who
Yeah.
do incredible things. And one of the things that really bothers me is how there's so much negativity about the government in the U.S. I mean, it's like been a campaign for a long time to kind of undermine our belief in our government, and I think very conscious on
That's
some
how
people's
Trump
part
got
to do that.
elected.
Right,
That's
and
how he
the
got
government
elected.
is so it's critically important. There's so many public services that none of this society or of our society would function without the government. And people who don't believe that a government is necessary, to me, is just madness. And so I think I would love to see us go back in a direction where we acknowledge the great work that governments do, the important work that governments do, that they can attract the highest caliber individuals to come be part of giving back and serving. There's plenty of people who really are motivated about serving and helping.
Yeah, if they're in the right mindset,
Yeah.
for sure.
So energy, I think, is one area
Yeah.
where, shouldn't be for profit organizations running it. It's creating resistance around moving us to renewables and sustainable energies, which is absolutely going to happen. I think healthcare is the same thing, right? It's clear that it's not serving humanity well the way it's currently structured in the U.S., and it's something we all have to be healthy, and we all deserve to live, healthy, productive lives.
Just like the slogan of the Bill Gates Foundation.
Right.
But on the other hand, how our government functions now, I mean, a lot of it is really controlled by the lobbyists, which,
Right.
I mean, so...
Yeah, Citizens versus United and
Yeah.
the corrupting power of money.
But
in
I
government
think
is
what you're saying, that we're living in interesting times, that there's a shift happening and like a paradigm shift, and is that people are learning that we have the power, So, and especially young people now, because they are the ones who are seeing the world with our climate crisis. They are the ones who are going to live in it, and they have a voice. And these voices are getting stronger. A friend of mine is actually doing an initiative about getting kids to vote, because she goes to these, not to posh colleges, like community colleges, and there's a lot of kids who work 2 jobs, 3 jobs
Right.
to put themselves through
Right.
college.
Amazing.
And they make it so hard for you to vote, and they don't know, or where do I sign up? Where's the polls, and how do I do it? And I mean, even if you see the pamphlets and all of these, it's so complicated.
So complicated. Yeah.
So she's created tools for these kids and to teach them how. And you go to a campus and they have raised voting to 500% in certain colleges in the Midwest and stuff. And she's so passionate about it. I'm like, bravo! She just retired, and this is her project.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, it is shocking how difficult we make voting in this country.
Shocking.
And it's clearly, obviously, there's a reason why some of the parties do not want everyone to be able to vote, and for it to be a true democracy, because it would not shift in in their favor.
And you know what? The most interesting thing was, then she talked to the head of the political science program in the college. And he was a Republican, and it was a black gay kid. Why is the black gay kid a Republican?
Yeah, right.
Because the Republican Party has funds these recruiters. They have millions of dollars in funds to recruit kids. They fly them into D.C. They kind of wine and dine them, and then they become their advocates. And what does the Democratic Party do? Unfortunately, it all happens with these grassroots organizations like My Friends to do those things. That's why I love what she does, because
that's amazing.
We need to kind of get them on the right track.
I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens this fall with the election, right? I mean,
First of all, with the nominations.
Yeah, the nomination first, right?
Yeah.
But then, because there's a potential for there to be right now there's some concern about whether some of the Democratic candidates are really electable, and depending on how moderate or how extreme that candidate ends up being, whether or not people will come together to support that. And I mean, clearly, the number one goal, at least in my mind, is we have to have a change. This is not, you can't have the damage he is doing to the U.S. and his administration is doing to the U.S. and undermining the government here and hurting the people, and the implications to our relationships throughout the world and climate change. And this is it's a crisis, right? I mean, there are this is a really scary time where humanity has such a short window to really, on the climate front side, to be able to turn the tide here. And technology may catch up and may help us, but we can't, assume that that's going to happen. And so we have to be making really dramatic changes, which are incredible opportunities for us. I mean, to think about completely changing our energy infrastructure in the U.S. and the jobs and the economic benefit that could have, instead of clinging on to fossil fuel, which has, relatively few jobs, is totally subsidized, does not make economic sense anymore, and is destroying our planet. Like, okay, well, so you could help a few rich people, or you could help the whole world and create more and more jobs, more economic benefit, more environmental benefit. Like, it's just a no-brainer, but we're not making those decisions.
Yeah, and I cannot understand how you can have this other mindset, why you would not want to do this, right?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
I think it's about economics.
And also, I think we need to stop this, because this behavior also, gives other people who have the tendency to be that person, gives them permission to behave. Oh, it's okay if our president behaves like I can too.
Right. Yeah,
and it's really dangerous.
Yeah.
It's really, because he's actually, he's deeply disturbed.
Yeah. Very
pathology
overt
is
racism.
yeah.
Yep.
It's crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy.
But I think because, when he got elected into office, I think it was also that people wanted a change, and they were fed up with the elite, with the political elite.
Right.
So it was kind of shocking, and also it had to do a lot. We all know that with the candidates and, and all of that. And on the other hand, he hasn't really been elected, so that's.
Right. But it was a cry for help.
It was a cry for help, and now we're at the same point, and that's why I'm hopeful, because everybody says, "Oh, he will be reelected," and I'm like, "Don't say it," because you're manifesting it here already.
Right.
I'm hopeful, and I'm hoping no matter what, and that we can, within the Democratic candidates, not have that, competitiveness and I don't like him and I don't like her.
Right.
And
whoever gets nominated, everyone has to come behind
people,
this person.
really, it's a no-brainer.
Right. It is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It is a no-brainer. But I think, going back to your point of why he got elected, at least part of it was because there were so many people who society is leaving behind and who are in a tremendous amount of pain and suffering and losing their jobs and not being trained and, in significant debt. And those, the Democratic Party historically has been the party that has tried to help those type of people, not the Republican Party. And it's fascinating that the Republican Party has been able to take ownership of it. And I think it has to do with the fact that Trump people just want to burn it all down and start again. I mean, they really want a revolution and to create something. They know our society has to change
and
so
radical.
significantly.
It needs to be radical.
And I totally agree with that too. I believe that it's not all about money and gun rights and some of the issues that the Republican Party is really focused on. It's more about how do we serve humans? How do we educate them? How do we feed them? How do we house them? How do we, give them an opportunity to really thrive in this world? And starting from a very early age, it's going to take us years and years and years to turn this all around, right? And to create, this has been a long time,
so out of balance,
process to try to allow very rich people to be able to control what happens in our world. There's a really interesting study that's come out that shows the correlation between what the poor people want and what rich people want, and how Congress reacts to that. And it's basically, as you might imagine, where this is going to go. If 100% of the poor people wanted something to happen, there's no correlation that it's going to happen. And then if a relatively small portion of the populace wants to see something happen, the wealthiest people, has a very high correlation with it happening. And that does not make any sense. You got to take money out of politics.
Yeah.
Anyway.
How?
Got to overturn Citizen United. So it's going to take, Congress doing that, and I think that's going to take Democratic control of Congress and probably maybe Democratic control of the White House as well to make that happen.
Yeah. I think, growing up in Germany, we had a kind of broader landscape of politics because we had many like different parties, and when we were not like a divided country.
Right.
And I think that has a lot to do with it too. And, I find also we need to kind of talk to each other because the divide is just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
If we're like,
I agree. I totally agree. I mean, one of the things that, we've gone down kind of a political path in this conversation, which makes me a little uncomfortable just because I don't, I think we have become so divisive, right?
Yeah.
We all, like, we have to have empathy for everyone. And this, like, we're one, like, I don't understand some of these viewpoints, but I'm sure they're not terrible people, right? So I believe most of the Republicans are not terrible people at all, and probably, great people with different perspectives. And how do we come together with this mindset of we're humans first, we're Americans, we're part of a bigger world that's happening, and how do we?
And we have the responsibility,
Yeah.
I think, as humans. And I like scale it down to a personal thing. Like when you have a fight with a friend, for example, and you're really mad, and then you say, she's such an asshole or something,
Right.
and then you don't talk to each other, and it's a really like, I'm done with this. And if you kind of somehow come together and you talk it out, and all of a sudden it's like a love fest and all of that. This needs to happen in the big picture, because when you do, reject all of that, you close the door. You're
Right.
not open
Right.
to listening to what they have to say, because like all your opinions harden and become stronger.
Yep.
And maybe out of proportion, so I find, because there's no willingness to.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of human nature, right? To
It
want to
is.
put people in groups and us versus them.
Yes.
And it's like we really quickly go to that place.
Yeah.
Which is not a helpful place to
No.
be. And so kind of remembering that and trying to fight against that and trying to connect. And also our society keeps us like we all operate in bubbles. We're in social media certainly emphasizes that, keeps feeding us back our own viewpoints instead of exposing us to other folks. And so, as much as I hate to do it, I try to click on Fox News stories and try to get some other perspectives. And I certainly have friends who have voted for Trump. It's really hard for me. And after the election happened, I for a while was not sure I could continue to kind of hang out with some of these people. And then ultimately, I know these are good people and have differing, like, I'm not sure exactly what drives them to vote that way, but ultimately I felt like they're not people I want out of my life. I need to keep them close, and it's important to be around a diversity of ideas and not to just be us versus them.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when we like stay in the bubble, we don't even, we have that in our lifestyle in Los Angeles. You go out, you're in the car, you're not in a subway or in a bus, like you don't interact with other people, and then you arrive at your destination at your friends, and it's always the usual suspects. And if you sometimes go out of it, you go like, oh wow, there's this whole world that exists out there. And
so healthy for you.
I try to immerse myself into it often.
Yeah. So what do you do? How do you do that?
If I go downtown, I take the metro.
Okay, good.
I always go to different parts of town. I explore. So I try to talk to people. Like the other day, I was just getting a drink at a bar, and I talked to this girl, like, just because I was polite, and I said, I'm sorry if I'm ordering over your shoulder, and all of it, like a stranger. I engage with people. I like to engage with people. Or when I walk my dog in the park, or you meet people, you talk to strangers.
Yeah, that's really cool. Really cool. I find I am I'm a little more introverted in some ways, but I'm trying to do that more and more, actually, and just connect with people. And you just find we're all people, right? And you end up connecting no matter where you are and having conversations with people. I stopped at one point to help an elderly woman who had gotten in a car accident, and I ended up like having this like incredible interaction with the tow truck drivers. And the tow truck drivers were just super interesting, really cool. We're so concerned and going to take care of this woman and take her down to their shop, and we're going to make sure that her son came and got her. And I don't know, it just showed me this, like exposed me to. I don't hang out with tow truck drivers all that often, and I don't know, like maybe I prejudged what a tow truck driver might be like, and they were amazing people, right? And I think the more you kind of just interact with people, you realize there's amazing people in every place throughout life, and we're all trying to do the best we can. And
like we said earlier, if you live in this small village and you're the baker and you're happy with it, great. Take pride in what you do, love it. But we've come to be a society where you always think, oh, the better and the worse, and oh, I'm not worthy, or it's these basic things that we carry within us, So what do you think? Coming back to the singularity and its branches, especially like AI, what's the danger or the risk of it for that? I remember in my executive program, there was also a guy who did a lecture about, the negative aspects of, not to be like here a bummer, but, it exists. And he was talking about crime and how it's been used for crime and so forth, and causing harm and suffering. So what do you think about that? Or what is in your university, how do you guys
I mean, most of these technologies certainly have the potential to be used for harm. And so there is real risk. There's a real responsibility that goes along with developing technologies. I think for a long time there has been a belief that there's no judgment in developing technology. But I think there's a bunch of folks now, like, let's just create it and see where it goes, and it might go in a great direction, it might go in a bad direction, but I don't really need to think about all those, secondary and tertiary or down the road type implications. I think that's starting to shift. I don't think it's happening fast enough, but I think there are, as we're starting to see some of the negative consequences around technology, I think people are starting to step back and say, okay, I have a responsibility to shepherd this technology, or to think about the potential downside applications of this technology, and maybe build that into how I develop it. I think AI certainly has the potential to do, all these things it's a program, right? And so it's how you guide it, how you program it. Is there a prime directive that tells it to do no harm, or to make sure it's, only benefiting humanity? Things like that, I think, maybe need to be thought about and integrated into the creation of some of these technologies. I worry about things like autonomous weaponized drones, right? This notion of letting a computer make the decisions around how a weapon might be used, that's really scary. There's some paths that do start to go down kind of a Terminator type path, right? Which no one wants to see happen. So that's something I worry about. Quantum computing and its ability to undermine all the cryptography that's out there. Again, some of these things are like bad actors, and what they could do with these technologies creates a real risk. In general, I think the benefits of these technologies should far outweigh the negative potential risks, but we have to be cautious about them. We have to, shepherd how they get utilized. And it's tough when you have so many different nation states who have different mindsets, and, someone like a Russia is going to have different thinking around, what they're willing to do, and are they willing to create autonomized weapons, and what does that mean, and what does that mean for the future of war? War is about scarcity of resources, right? We're clearly not in that place anymore, and war is no longer necessary. And if you don't have corrupt leaders, if you have people who are really interested in their people, there never has to be another war again. Right. And so how do we why do we need to create those type of technologies?
Your words in God's ears. No more war,
Doesn't feel like right now we're going in that direction.
For a long time, we didn't. There was no necessity for war for a very long time, and it still happens.
Yep, that's right.
What's the danger jumping from AI and war, big one, to your Tesla autopilot, or let's say autonomously driven cars. What happens if that car has an accident
I'm sure that car will have an accident, but it's
and there's
just
a injured pedestrian or
like from an insurance perspective or
driver, or what happens?
who's at fault for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could be the car manufacturer. I would think probably from a liability perspective. But if you look at the data, like the number of hours that have been driven autonomously now with no accidents, it's just extraordinary. Like it's so clear, even though we're relatively early in this technology, it's so clear that they're so much safer than humans, right? And I think it's like 1.2 million people die every year across the globe as a result of automobile accidents, right? It's a crazy number of people. There's no reason that needs to happen, and that's going to go, I think, basically to zero in the next 20 years or so. So I think there's some liability issues to think through. There's obviously some employment issues to think through, as drivers are no longer needed for trucks or for cars. What do those people shift into? But in terms of kind of reducing injuries and reducing deaths and spending less and less time in traffic and thinking about the productivity benefits that go from, I can't wait till I'm able to be in a car and I don't have to be looking forward. I can be sitting having a conversation and back and, or I'm reading or I'm watching a movie or I'm learning. There's so many things that I'll be able to do with that time.
Frees up a lot of time.
Right.
Although we want people to listen to the podcast in the car.
Exactly. They'll have that much more time. Right. Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that in general. As I said before, I think we're entering this incredible new era. I think some of the autonomous vehicle work that's being done, both for cars and passenger drones, especially in LA where there is a lot of traffic. The idea of being able to get quickly from downtown to Santa Monica or Malibu in 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
The traffic is going crazy. Yeah. I'm always dreaming about. Remember that movie, The Fifth Element?
I do. I love that movie.
I want these vehicles where you just kind of go, oh, it's too much traffic.
Boom. Yeah. I think
when is that going to come?
I think you're going to have, Uber is talking about launching autonomous drones in LA, I think in 2021.
You kidding?
No.
Wow.
So, it's close. It's close.
See,
some
this
of this
is
stuff
like, when was that
amazing.
movie made? Like, it was a while ago.
A while ago.
But it was so futuristic, and all of a sudden, boom, we're here.
These things are happening. It's interesting. Like the future is, it's happening right now. And some of the things that are happening in medicine are just extraordinary as well. Some of the, they're growing organs now. They can harvest your stem cells and grow. There's a company, United Therapeutics, it's growing. If you had to have a lung transplant, they would grow a lung for you. And they're working on hearts and, all these. It's just mind-blowing.
And also these nanobots like that, they're the size of a red blood cell that can destroy pathogens in
circulating in your body and identifying dangers and cancers and killing them. And we're entering this amazing period where I think we will be able to dramatically improve the quality of life. We will be able to think about work in a different way. I think we'll be able to think about what it means to be human and what we spend our time on in a different way, and really reimagining. You can imagine if we all had more than enough, right? And we were able to produce everything we needed, the energy we needed, the food we needed, to do it in a way that was sustainable and beneficial to the planet and to live without pollution. Like all those things are here and feasible. It's a matter of now transitioning to this new world and having governments that help bring this stuff to reality.
Yeah. Wow. I was just going to ask you something. Now I remember. So what about the aspect of, which was kind of Ray Kurzweil's kind of motivation, was immortality?
Transhumanism, yeah.
Transhumanism, like, so we combine, artificial intelligence with biological humans. And I remember that he was taking all these supplements. He even had his own kind of brand, I think, of supplements and stuff.
Yeah, he's still taking a lot of supplements. I think it was at 200 or so at one point a day. I think he's
Right.
down to, last time I interviewed him, I think he said he was like under 80 supplements a day, which is still a tremendous amount of supplements. So,
But he wants to make it until like that time that he predicted, which was, I think, 2040.
Yeah, it's now down. I think it's 2029.
Oh, he thinks
It's
that?
accelerating.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's amazing. So
How old
happening
is he
sooner.
now?
I think he's in his late 60s.
Late 60s.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
could make it.
So he calls it breakout, basically, where you're gaining more than a year of life for every year that you're living. And he thinks he's pretty close, actually. He actually said in the last interview I did with him that he thought he had actually achieved it and was
Okay.
at a point now where he was gaining more life than he was losing. We'll see. I hope he's right. Singularity really isn't about transhumanism at all, so we don't talk
I know,
about that
it's
or
just
cover that
Ray's
at the
thing.
university. It's Ray's
Ray's
thing.
thing.
Ray
I
has
do
been,
know
yeah,
that,
yeah,
yeah.
just for the listeners,
for-
so they
yeah.
know, and so the Singularity folks don't get upset with me. But yeah, so we basically, he believes that it's not too far off that we will be able to essentially. There's a couple different concepts. One is just adding more life to your existing life, and the other one is maybe leaving the physical body and being able to put your mind out into a computer and to be able to continue on in
Yeah.
kind of a virtual world.
Is that movie they did with Johnny Depp? What was that?
Transcendence?
Transcendence.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
that
Yep,
was what
exactly.
that was about.
Exactly.
And then then there's the other thing that I remember. I read a book by Timothy Leary called Design for Dying or something, where he was back in the day when it was the first, like the beginning of, is it called Alcor, that company?
Oh, Alcor, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the cryogenics company.
Yeah,
That's-
the cryogenics. So, and then he was meeting with them. And when did Leary die? In the 90s? Yeah.
I'm not sure, yeah.
I think 96 or so. I would have to fact check that. But anyhow, so, and then he met with them all, and then, you're going to freeze yourself and they can read.
Is he frozen?
No.
Okay.
But because in the book he wrote, like, and they were all so weird and they're all these boring scientists. What if I kind of come back to life and there's only like a population of that kind around? I don't want to be around. And he abandoned the idea. But at that first Singularity Summit in New York, I met a guy who was 16 or 17 who had the bracelet. And we interviewed him, and he was extraordinary, like that. He was totally into it since he was 12
It'd be interesting to
or
catch up with
something.
him now and
Right?
see if he's still,
I
where
know.
he is.
I
what his
need to
thinking
find
is
that
like.
footage.
That would be super
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'll bet, at 16, right, you change a lot as you grow older.
But I never understood how that's going to work with the cryo. Like, how can you rebuild a human, so to speak, from, do you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I think there's the idea is as soon as someone dies, you basically freeze them, and with the hope that technology catches up, gets to a point basically where you're able to bring them back to life and to be able to solve or address whatever ever killed them. I think it's more challenging. Some people are just freezing their heads, and that creates a whole nother level of complexity, right? How are you going to then attach it to another body or bring it back to life? That one I can't quite get my head around. Sorry, the pun. Excuse the pun. But I could imagine. I mean, they've had instances where people have fallen into lakes and frozen and been dead, but been slowly warmed up and
reanimated?
reanimated and brought back to life. And that is, from a technology perspective, is pretty proven. Like, you can do it if you take the right process. You can.
So they know what technology to use to do that already.
To do that, I don't know if. Yeah, I think they. So I've read about examples where someone has like fallen in a stream and frozen to death, basically, and then been brought back to life.
Wow.
I don't know. I'm sure they've done it with animals where they've tested them with liquid nitrogen, which is how they do it, I believe, at Alcor, and then slowly warm them up and bring them back to life. What's also interesting, though, is you're doing it with a human. It would seem like it would make more sense to me to do it before the person is dead. Right? Like right before they're in their final days and you're going to go freeze them, as opposed to someone has actually died. And then you've got a whole nother issue. You have to bring them, restart the body.
But if you say they already did that with somebody, so the heart stops and the
Yeah.
brain shuts down and they bring them back.
They can bring them back to life. Yeah. Yeah,
I've
they
never heard
slowly-
of anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, you slowly warm them up, and you can get the heart going again, and no damage has been done.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's really,
Wow.
really extraordinary. So I think that the basic technology, the idea of it works. The question is, what do you, if you've already died, can they, and you've died from cancer, can they figure out how to either reanimate you and address that medical condition at the time? What kind of world are you coming back into? What is it like, mentally for you to try to readjust, find yourself 500 years in the future? And,
Right.
I mean, it'd be fascinating. I think we're going more in a path toward that. To me, feels like a relatively shorter term need, where you get frozen and then are brought back to life. I think we're heading more in a direction where it's going to be about just extending life and higher quality of life for a much longer period. And maybe some people, if they make it to 250, will decide they want to get frozen and come back where they might be able to be totally immortal.
Yeah. Wow.
It's
Crazy.
pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, I have to look into that Alcor thing, what's going on. It's like, I remember when I read Albert Einstein's biography by Isaacson, there was this part, I think in the back, before I started that big thing, that when he died, that they extracted his brain and then they preserved it because they wanted to keep it for research for later because he was such a genius. And then somehow some scientists kind of slice it. How wild is that?
Yeah. I've read about that. People having little slivers
Yeah.
of his brain.
And I'm like,
yeah.
I have a slice of Einstein's brain. What are you going to do with
Poor
that?
Einstein. Right, exactly. Yeah,
Crazy.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Awesome. So you said you're transitioning out of the university. So what's your next step?
So I've got this fund called Kitty Hawk Ventures that invest in early stage,
What is that?
kind of late seed, Series A type companies. So I named it Kitty Hawk because Kitty Hawk, North Carolina was the birth of aviation, and I viewed Singularity University in many ways as this vantage point to discover the birth of new technologies and industries that I thought were going to be important kind of going forward. And so started investing in some of the interesting companies that I saw in that ecosystem, and then ended up raising some money around that. And so I'm definitely focusing some of my efforts on that and supporting those companies. And it's incredible what's happening now. I mean, just the problems that people are trying to solve, the technologies that are out there, and I'm trying to find companies that I think can play an important role in some of these transitional efforts and around energy and food and medicine, and have a positive impact as well. So it's just a really exciting time to be working with entrepreneurs and investing.
So it's more an extension. So it's kind of like you were at the university, like in the dense kind of epicenter of all of that, and now you can kind of bring it out into
so that's right. I've gotten to just know so many extraordinary people through that, through the university, and people all around the world. And so just how I continue to kind of leverage and connect with those folks, how I help some of the entrepreneurs and startups in that space and bring some of these hopefully important technologies to market and do it in a way that's helping the world. It's really it's super, super exciting.
Do companies like that also come to you or come to the university to ask for, to connect or?
Yeah, I mean, there's an accelerator within the university. There's something called Singularity University Ventures, which is not an investment arm, but it's about helping accelerate and educate entrepreneurs as well. So there's programs that are designed just for startups, and then just kind of a natural part of building all the curriculum that we do. So whether it's for a large summit or an executive program, you're trying to think through, what are the technologies or the companies that are going to give attendees a window into something really profound and next level, and give them a sense of where the world is going. Like, this is an important technology for you to understand, and this is an entrepreneur who's creating something that really has the potential to have a dramatic change in the world. So it just naturally kind of brings you into connection with those type of people and those technologies, and It's it's been one of the great gifts of my life, like getting to be in a place where you're so stimulated all the time
Yeah.
and thinking and learning. I think we both share this love of learning,
Yeah.
right, and belief in growth and continuing
Absolutely.
to grow. And
Yeah.
so for me, that's
The only way for me.
yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
Because you can't get stuck, because what's going to happen then?
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Yeah. And I mean, it's a really interesting time to be alive where it's not like I think we both have probably taken different paths than most people, but for most people, you're not going to have one career anymore.
Yeah.
And I think people get that already,
Yeah.
but it's like life is going to be a series of 20 different things you're going to do over your life. And so
Yeah.
you're always going to be learning new
I'm
skills.
already in my
and-
20th incarnation in this life.
I feel the same way. Exactly. Exactly.
Wow, that's amazing. So you basically you live here. You said you live in Santa
I live in
Monica
Santa
now, but the
Monica.
university is Mountain View, right? At the
Yep.
NASA
Yeah, it's
Ames?
actually just moved down to Santa Clara. Actually, we
Okay.
expanded a little bit and took some
But you don't have
larger
to
space.
like physically be there. So you're also doing the summits, like so you travel. I know you were in Zurich because you brought me back Luxembourger leaflets.
That's right.
Really.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. We did a summit in Zurich. I think I was there. I was there for Davos actually, which was really
Davos,
neat
yeah.
experience. Yeah. But we do summits all over the world, and so we'll do I think about close to 20 international summits this year.
What's the next thing you're doing?
So I'm off to Israel at the end of March. I'm part of this like fascinating group of 10 people with like Howard Schultz and General Stan McChrystal and a bunch of folks who are all going over there to learn about kind of mandatory service. So in Israel, people will
Are you going to a kibbutz?
I'm sure we're going to go visit a kibbutz. It's about a week-long trip there, but it's this whole notion of people serving their country and how we might be able to not do it in a mandatory way, but bring it here to the U.S. where there might be incentives for people after college to spend a year or two kind of thinking about contributing back to the country. So whether that's doing something like City Year or Teach Across America, or Teach for America, excuse me, but you're spending a year or two kind of giving back to the country, and what a great thing that is. So we're going over there to learn about that and get to meet with some of the folks there, and I think that should be a really interesting kind of learning trip, and a summit in South Africa a little bit later on, and so a bunch of fun things going on and interesting connecting with people, and again kind of continuing this theme of learning and hopefully getting people excited about this time that we're living in.
Yeah, and seeing it in this positive way, that we can use all of that to make this world a better place.
Yep.
I love that.
Absolutely.
I love that optimism. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming.
Such a
Your
pleasure.
busy
Such a pleasure. I
schedule
can't believe
was
this is
so
only
much
your
fun.
second talk. You're a pro.
Oh, thank you. I don't know about that. You're a pro for sure.
Yeah, so great. Really great to be here. A pleasure and such an honor. I love what you're trying to do, and this notion of trying to understand people's unique journey through life, I think is important and helpful for people because
So helpful. And I can already see a thing like, first of all, the thing is, with David, who I did yesterday, who's an editor, it's like apprenticing, learning, starting from the bottom up, and then also failing. And it's kind of a common threat through everybody's life that a lot of people want to take the elevator and not the stairs, and it's actually not working,
It's a marathon.
Yeah.
And there are examples, of the people, the 22-year-old billionaires, but that's not most people's path, and life is a journey. And I have a coach who has this really cool phrase that I like, which is high engagement, low attachment. So really work super hard at things and want them to happen, but don't feel so attached to something that it's like,
I get it.
If it fails, you fail, right? I mean, it's like life is full of wins and filled with losses, but I thought it was just such a healthy way to think about life and about really being engaged, but not letting it affect you so deeply. Like we started to talk at one point about some of the more challenging journeys as well, and I've taken a bunch of swings as an entrepreneur, and some of them have been brutal, where I was like, doing everything I could. I launched this health and wellness company and got it into Whole Foods and Natural Channel.
What product
retail.
was
it? Was called Fix, Phix, and it was a healthy energy and a healthy sleep product. So I'd seen what was happening with Red Bull and wanted to kind of create a healthier alternative to it, and green tea and matcha, and launched it, got it going, and 2008 happened, and the economy just imploded. And I had some fairly high net worth folks who were backing me, and they were like, didn't know if we were going to survive and this period in human history, and we're certainly not going to be putting money into high risk startups. And so I started having to fund this thing for all out of my own balance sheet, and then I stopped taking a salary, and I spent, I think, about 13 or 14 months with no salary, and got to a point where I was like literally living on a friend's couch in his office, and they didn't have a shower. I'd have to go to the gym every day to the shower. And I was like, I was in my 30s, I think my late 30s, trying to do this. And I had taken money from investors that were some of the most important people in my life. And I felt this incredible obligation to do everything I could to try to keep that business from failing. And ultimately it did. I ended up selling it, super soft landing, but it was a failure. And I was just in the darkest place, and I took it so personally, right? It was such a statement about me and a failure, and yet here I was. I had a company. I'd gotten it into Whole Foods. It was growing, but then I couldn't raise capital because of what was happening in the external world, which I had no control about. And I wish I had known this, high engagement, low attachment. I would have gotten myself out of that situation a little bit earlier.
So simple, yet so profound.
Yes, exactly. Like so many things. So,
but see, that's what we talked about earlier. Is why? How can some people move on so much easier, and some people just dwell in the kind of that failure or misery or whatever it is.
I dwelled for a long time. It took me a while to kind of bounce back and start climbing back out.
But you didn't do it again because you learned from it.
That's right.
It's like, the things that what Einstein says, insanity is if we do these things and we keep doing them.
The same thing over and over again. Yeah, and expecting a different outcome.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. All about learning and growing.
It's an old Vedic wisdom too, because, I practice Ayurvedic medicine, which is an old wisdom, science. And they also, they say the same thing. You keep doing what you're doing. You keep getting the same results. Simple as that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think we probably all know people who just seem like they're stuck, right? And can't keep doing the same thing over and over again, aren't happy.
And that's my mission somehow in life too. I want to get people unstuck. I want to get them out of the kind of hamster wheel.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love it. I have no doubt you're going to be super successful. And now you've got an opportunity to kind of amplify your voice with the podcast and reach a lot more people.
And it's just kind of an experiment, but maybe new ideas will come from that to kind of
course,
steer it that way. We'll see. So is there anything that is the next big thing in technology that we don't know about yet, but you have the inside scoop?
So I've heard there's one thing, which is they've been working for a long time on fusion energy. And I've heard that we're the first examples of fusion energy. They're finally proving it out, or it's very, very, very close, where fusion energy looks like it's going to actually be a real way of generating net positive energy. So right now you can generate energy with a fusion reactor, but it requires more energy going in than ultimately gets produced. And now they're finally switching that, and been working on this for a very long time. But if that really happens, that's a completely new paradigm in energy production.
It's a total game changer.
Total game changer. So that's super exciting. It's supposed to be announced relatively soon. And so
you heard it here first.
I've heard that's happening. We'll see. The announcement hasn't happened, but I think that's a big one.
It's not a bad secret to reveal.
Exactly. Yeah. Really exciting. There's so many cool things happening on the energy front. I mean, solar is going to win and has to. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That was funny enough, the first thing I learned from my dad when I was 8. Like, he was explaining to me, my dad was an engineer and an entrepreneur and had many patents. And he explained to me, energy doesn't go away; it just changes form. And I was like, as an 8-year-old, I remember that my whole life, that he said that to me when I was 8. So interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about.
On so many levels,
right? You think about us and what happens to us when we're, as we transition out of this body, and our energy and what it goes into. Yeah. Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to be here.